Welcome to the 6th Annual Parent Network Workshop. We are so pleased to have you join us for Leaving the Nest, What Parents Need to Know About Helping Their Kids Transition to Adulthood. Before we get started, there are just a few housekeeping items. If you have questions during the session, please use the Q&A feature that's located in your Zoom menu bar. You can also throw it in the chat if you would like. In the coming days, we will be posting this recording of the session on the idahoparentnetwork.org website. So feel free to check back and share it with anyone you think will be able to benefit from it. We'll also include links to the resources we discuss in this presentation. So here's who we have joining us today. We have Randy Cole, the Secondary Transition Coordinator with the Idaho Department of Education. We have Allison Lowenthal, the State Transition Coordinator for the Idaho Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. We have Alan Harrison, who is the owner of Alan R. Harrison Law. We have Kristen Matthews, the Program Manager at Idaho Department of Health and Welfare in the Division of Self-Reliance. Angela Lindig, Executive Director of Idaho Parents Unlimited, more popularly known as IPOL. And then I am joining you, and I am with the Parent Network. So I'm excited to have everybody here. Today, we're going to have a lot of information in a short period of time, so buckle up and get ready. But we're going to understand the role of transition planning in the schools. We're going to be familiar with Invoke Rehab, that's what they call it, vocational rehab opportunities. Know the difference between consents, powers of attorney, and guardianship. Understand how organizations like IPOL can help you ask the right questions, and understand how to help your child apply for benefits when they become an adult. So this is a session that has definitely been asked for by parents. We get questions all the time. What do we do when they turn 18? Is there some magic button to push? And the answer is no magic button, but here's some information that should be able to help you. So go ahead, Angela, take it away.
Thanks, Laura, and I'm glad to be here with all of you. I know I'm going to learn some extra information today too. So Idaho Parents Unlimited is the statewide parent training and information center and family-to-family health information center in Idaho, working with families who have children and youth with disabilities and special health care needs. And of course, that would include children and youth with mental health diagnoses. So, and as it says here on the slide, there's not a specific path. There's no specific path to transition for any child, no matter what their diagnosis is. And so we have in our office this book that you see on the screen. It's a guidebook. It's called Building a Bridge. And full disclosure, it is only available currently on our website as a PDF document, and it's a bit outdated and it's being updated. So the new version is coming out, and it's actually at the printer as we speak. And so it'll have all sorts of more current information in it, but the content hasn't changed much as far as what's in there. So we want to make sure that parents have access to all of the types of information that they're going to need for helping their youth transition to adulthood, no matter what their path might be. And so there are local resources in there. There are other groups that they can connect with. And then we really do recommend starting very early. Our kids with these diagnoses, they don't just magically know what they're doing the day they turn 18, and none of us did either, I'm venturing to guess. So, but nevertheless, this book really does provide guidance. And one of the things on the next slide that I want to share is this wall of text. This is in the guide, but it is really about getting organized. And so if we're going to be starting early, we want to get organized and have lots of documentation in a specific place that you're going to probably need for whatever adult services or resources that you might be trying to access. And so some of these are listed, well, they're all listed on here, but this isn't even a complete list, but these are some of the things that we recommend. So things like your birth certificate, if you're eligible for Social Security, and you might not know that until you turn 18. So that's one of those things that there's income requirements there as well. So you might have a child who was not eligible for Social Security as a benefit, before 18 who would be eligible at 18. So you're going to want to start to document and gather these types of pieces of information.
Angela, one of the things I saw
yeah.
on there, the evaluation tests and therapist reports.
Yes.
First of all, if you don't already have a copy, that's not a quick thing to do. You don't expect to walk in and have it back to you that day, especially if they're older documents. But then I think the thing that I also noticed is that some of those tests and evaluations were big deals. Like if you get a full neuropsych evaluation, that took a long time, but they aren't a one and done. If you did it at 10, it's not going to be real effective at 18.
That's
so
right.
I think it's also looking at them and realizing how long it's been. Like, oh, I thought we just did that. You may actually need to have some of those redone. And so knowing that before the day they turn 18 is a lovely thing.
And you might know that through your school situation as well. So as you're reaching transition age, and you have, if your child is receiving special education, which Randy's going to talk about in a second, but they may have an IEP, an individualized education program that has some of this built in. And then on the other hand, they might have a 504 plan, and their 504 plan isn't going to be, you're not going to have those same requirements for documentation and transitioning to adulthood that you do in an IEP. So those are all of the types of things that we recommend. Yes, start early. When we say early, we actually mean really early. We really think that people should be thinking about transition to adulthood really from the early years, elementary school. What is this going to look like? Now, you might not have gotten a diagnosis on some of these things until your child's older. And so these are the things you start to think about at any point of diagnosis. Now that we have this, what's it going to look like? And how are we going to help our kids be the most successful in adulthood? So our office, go ahead, Laura.
I say, don't get overwhelmed by how much it is. I went out and I may or may not have bought the Costco bundle packs of binders. Yeah. And I just went and organized my son's information, who recently went through this transition to adulthood. And I am 8 binders in. They're 2.5-inch binders, and that really only covers the last 2 years of what we have done for him. Yeah. And what documentation, I just organized it. I actually got out my label maker. It made me feel better about my universe. And I put on tabs and stuff, because I was getting overwhelmed with everything I was keeping track of. And then
I like that too. I'm like you. I like the binders. I like a physical copy of things. I know that we're doing a lot more online and keeping digital health records and those types of things. But I think having some, both is helpful depending on how they're going to be used.
That and the fact people keep mailing me things and I have to put them someplace.
One other thing that I just wanted to say about our organization: families can call us at any point on any issue that they might be having on anything, any topic. But we do have, and it's also under construction, and aren't all websites always under construction, but we do have a youth section and youth in transition on our website. One of the things that I think is helpful for any and all kids there is a guide that was put out, I think, by the state of Idaho. It's called Now That I'm 18. Or Now I've Turned 18 in Idaho, and it's very specific to all the things that are applicable to our kids once they become adults themselves. And I just strongly recommend taking a look at that as well. So I think that's all I'm going to cover for here. Let's just talk about this. So these are the topics that we're going to go into next, and each of my other co-panelists here are going to take a piece of each of these. So we're going to be discussing benefits and insurance, the various community supports that exist, any sort of legal paperwork that you're going to need or that you will have, employment, and post-secondary education, or what's included in education at transition age. And so I think from there, I'll turn it over, I believe, to Randy.
Thank you, Angela. All right, yeah, so I'm gonna go over some transition age information. So really, transition in Idaho in the education world starts by the time kids turn 16. There is a question on the slide, can we start earlier than that? And as Angela said, yes, please, we would love people to start thinking about this in elementary school. In my position, that's really something I'm advocating with teachers, is pushing down into at least middle school, if not if not elementary school, getting kids and parents aware of what transition looks like, and what they can be expecting once they get into high school. And what if my child doesn't have an IEP? And kind of these in both the next two questions, if the child doesn't have an IEP, or if my child's on a 504 plan, there is an overarching graduation. It's not really a graduation requirement, but it's a requirement based on Idaho law that by the end of 8th grade, all students have developed a parent-approved student learning plan. And I know not all parents have heard of this. I didn't even know it was a thing until, I randomly got an email from a counselor that told me. So I'm even learning stuff daily about what's out there for kids. But yes, that student learning plan should be something that they're updating every year with their counselors. So even if you're not in an IEP, not in a 504, you have at least that document that's going to be connecting kids from high school to post high school, whether it's college, training, job, living situations, whatever. And then the question, what happens if an IEP doesn't identify transition by the time they're 16? That would be talk to the teacher first, or the case manager, talk to the administrator, talk to the special ed director in your district. If you feel like things aren't going your way, call me, call Angela even, she can direct you to the right people. We can get that worked out. We can work with you on that. And then, like I said, can we start earlier than 16? Yes, please do.
I think one of the things that I was most surprised with is at the IDP meetings, all of a sudden we started having this weird section in the meeting where they'd come in with, these are the careers your child thinks they might want to engage in, and these are the classes they'll need to take. And I remember going like, where did this come from? And then once I caught on, which I was a little slow on the uptake, I realized that they had been actually talking to him about what he wanted to do after high school. And I think I was so bogged down in the getting from day to day to day that I hadn't had, what are your plans to rule the world conversations with him. And I was kind of really pleasantly surprised by all of the really cool things he thought he was going to do with his life. And I had to take a moment and go, oops, as a parent, I forgot to ask any of that, because I was so worried about therapies and treatments and insurance and, all the other things. So I was really grateful that the educators had started doing that and started showing up to these meetings and reminding me that my kid wasn't actually always going to be in high school. Like, oh yeah, there's
more. So yeah, we've updated this year our, if anyone's ever used it, the moving on binder, which is a document that's kind of even Angela went over all those documents that you start collecting. It's kind of a place you can start thinking about what you need to collect to be prepared for transitioning to adulthood. We've also updated two documents, the planning, and these are for parents and students, a planning for graduation document and a transition activities document. And Laura, if you need me to get you those links, I will.
Please do.
They have the graduation requirements and then just outlines what it takes to get to a regular diploma or an adapted graduation.
So I realize we're talking about transition services, and these are important things, but I think that for the parents that either their kids are younger or their IEP team hasn't brought this up, this next slide is kind of important.
Yes.
What is it?
Yes. So what is it? So transition, and this is just kind of taken straight from the special education manual. Transition services are that coordinated set of activities for the student, designed with results-oriented processes. We're looking at improving the academic and functional achievement of the student, and we're facilitating that movement, like we've been saying, from school to post-school, whatever that post-school looks like for that student. And then on the next slide, I think it gets a little more in depth about what that can look like. So IEP services can be, and as you know, if you have a student on an IEP now, those services are individualized. So it's what the student needs to be successful in school. And then once we reach high school and we're looking at transition, it's what does the student need to work on or learn to be successful post-high school. So it's instruction, it's related services. We can have services and community experiences, employment, where we're learning about employment, researching about employment, getting some job experience, even in the high school years, learning about post-school living opportunities, daily skill instruction, and then functional vocational evaluations as needed. And a lot of this you're going to hear again from Allison, because we really partner and do a lot of the similar things, which helps just build and strengthen the services for kids.
Well, we just got a comment in the chat that made me chuckle. It said, when I have my kiddos put together their bios for IEP meetings, I have them list what their future career plans are currently, and it always changes, and it keeps Invoke Rehab on their toes.
Yes. Yep.
Sandy, if I could just interrupt real quick too, even though there is that learning plan that takes place by the end of 8th grade, our kids who are on 504 plans don't circle back to this. So I think it's really important for parents to be aware that while these are transition services within the IEP, they're not necessarily taking place within a 504. So it really is going to require parents and youth to advocate for those needed, not necessarily services, but at least resources, use with their school counselor, who may be their case manager for their 504 plan, or their teachers or the principal, but also recognizing, and Allison can talk about this, but our kids do have access to Invoke Rehab services, even if they're on a 504. And sometimes we don't, as parents, we don't even know what that is. So
and I think
advocacy piece is important.
It's important to also remember that I think that there's kind of this assumption that our kiddos might need these services to catch up, that, like get up. But there's also that other end where we have these kids who have, IEPs and 504 needs that have, like on the other end. I have a kiddo I work with who really, 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 really bright. So her concern is that she needs some supports for like anxiety and stuff in school, but she wants to push ahead. So she's touching college classes. And then how do we, while still in high school, manage the college level and teach those anxiety skills so that they can handle it? And for her, actually doing that while still in high school was a good idea, instead of waiting until she was in college and didn't have the kind of the people around her who knew her. So I think it's important that transition doesn't always mean how do we catch up to 18. It also, to what we think neurotypical peers would look like. I think it's always it's finding their ninja skill and finding a way to make it something that they can do in a community setting and advocate for themselves. There's that part of transition too, where we've had this adult support behind them, that it's time for us to start taking a step back and teaching them those skills so that they can have those conversations on their own, which was a flip from the other kid I was working, that I work with my other kiddo who, so I just thought I'd point out that it's on both ends. It's not always catching them up. It's sometimes teaching them how to advocate what they're already doing. So.
Yeah, I agree. And then I like that Angela mentioned the counselors, teachers, admin, but there's also many of our schools now have specific to their schools a career and college counselor, which can help with a lot of those things as well. Connecting them with resources to help, like Laura was saying, taking a college class now, and then how do I deal with that if I have anxiety or depression or whatever it is. If I need some support, we're learning that in high school, and we have people who can help work with the kids on building those skills to be ready when they do jump out on their own into college. I think, yes, post-school activities. So activities are a little different than transition goal areas or services, because they're usually shorter, quicker things that the students do. It could be research about colleges. It could be research about jobs. It could be a quick job shadow. It could be looking at what adult services are out there and just really getting a list of resources of adult services. Activities can be things that the parents get as well. Learning about independent living options, and then researching or learning about community participation. And then on the next slide, how we create the plan. And this goes back to what Angela and Laura were talking about with assessments. These are great assessments to keep. They're built in, they'll be summarized in the IEP, but annually these students are getting, whether it's formal or informal, some sort of transition assessment that helps us figure out where we need to help them in the areas of training, education, and sometimes even independent living. And then that is what links us or helps us link to creating goals in those areas. And then
we had
yes,
as we're on this topic, one of our comments in the chat was that this mom felt that all her IEP team was doing was transitioning, but not actually addressing the needs right now. Like, let's go, let's go, let's go. But what about right now?
not actually
You know, how do we talk about the future if our current needs aren't being listened to? And I think that that is one of those fine balances in the teaming process of making sure. I mean, I do have to say, the first time that the secondary transition coordinator showed up at the IEP team meeting, I was like, whoa, we're still like making sure we go to class. Can we, you know, I mean, yay, he wants to rule the world, but can we back it up a minute and make sure that we graduate? And so I think that sometimes we've talked about the same thing so long that it's exciting to talk about something new. But we do need to remind the team that a transition plan has to start someplace and transition to something. And if the starting place isn't good, we still need to resolve those issues as well.
Yeah, and that actually leads directly into what's on this slide, Laura. So we, on those annual goals, we're not giving up on all those other annual goals, like attending to class or increasing our reading comprehension or whatever. We're connecting those goals to the transition. So I think sometimes that's not clearly stated in a meeting, that we're still working on those things. And here's how it relates to those big fun ideas of what are you doing after high school? So that's definitely a piece of the IEP that's important, is that you're connecting all of that and grounding the student and the parents and the teachers that we're still having to work on all these things to step towards that post-secondary goal.
Definitely. And then when we're talking about post-secondary and what we're doing outside agency stuff, I'm excited to have Allison here to talk about Invoke Rehab, because this is one of those things that parents hear about, but unless they've actually participated in, it's one of those unicorns you feel like you have to chase down. And if you know how to do it, it's really simple. She's easy to find if you know to look for her. And so anyway, I would, you know, tell us about this, Allison.
Thank you, Laura. So I first want to go into a little bit that I'm going to be spending more time talking about Invoke Rehab from the perspective of students and or youth with disabilities. And so as Angela had mentioned before, so Invoke Rehab, we actually work with adults as well. So we will work with people up and through the age of pretty much retirement of any individual with a disability. Not only do we serve people who received special education services while they were in school, but we also will work with students who were on 504 services, or those with mental health issues that may not have even needed any type of services within schools. And so our reach and what our definition of a disability is quite a bit larger than what most people look at. And I will say a majority of the students who come to us are individuals on IEPs, whereas we would love to see some of those other needs, you know, because as, you know, Laura mentioned, and as, you know, the comment in the chat, if we're not working on these current issues, what if the current issue is anxiety? It's not that it's not being able to access their schoolwork because they might be gifted or whatever it may be. How do we address that current issue of anxiety and then figure out how that plays into their ability for employment? So we are able to look at all of those. But as I said, I'm really going to be focusing more on talking to you guys about students who are 14 through 21. I love that Amy's comment about keep Invoke Rehab on our toes, because that's exactly what we want, and especially for transition age students, is we want to be kept on our toes, because a lot of the services that I'm going to be talking about are those exploratory services. You know, I can't remember who had said it right at the beginning. Who knew what we were going to be doing at 18? I think, Angela, it might have been you. Well, I sure didn't. I never would have imagined I'm here. And that's what we want our students to be able to do as well. And I think sometimes individuals with disabilities, they get kind of pinholed that it's, well, okay, well, that's what you said you're going to do. So now we're going to direct everything and do everything to move towards that. But that's not all we want to do. We want them to be able to explore, learn about different careers, and take steps to gain the skills that they need to eventually find where they want to be. So with that, as I said, I'm going to be focusing on our services that are more for students who are 14 through 21. The main services that we really focus on for these students are called pre-employment transition services. What these 5 services are counseling on post-secondary education, instruction and self-advocacy, job exploration counseling, work-based learning, and work readiness training. I wanted to just show you here the numbers of these services that we've been able to provide for students over the last few years. And what our hope is I would hope to be able to share this slide in 5 years from now and to see these numbers doubled around the state. Because although I'm excited about a number of the services that we've had, I would really like to see these a lot higher. As you can see, we've done more work-based learning and work readiness than we have our other services. And that has mostly been because that is what the community and teachers have told us students need. Teachers have said, we can do counseling on post-secondary, we can do job exploration, we do instruction on self-advocacy. We need Invoke Rehab to come in and do these other 2, which is why it's been an emphasis on a huge focus of what we're doing, but we also want to work on some of those other things. Next slide.
Oops, sorry.
No,
There.
no worries. So I want to give you guys some examples of some of the programs that we have available for this student population of those 14 through 21. All of the programs that I'm going to tell you about have no cost to them. They're available to, as I said, any student with a disability around the state. And the other thing that I would say is Laura said, yes, Invoke Rehab, we want to be here for you. Most of my programs go unfilled each time that I have them. And so we would love to be on wait lists. I mean, we don't, because of course we want to serve the students that we need. But the fact that year after year, I've had these programs go unfilled, and they've been really successful programs for students. So one of the programs we have is ISU. We partner with ISU to put on Academy Next. We have done this, the last 2 years, we have done this program virtually, and it's actually worked out really well because students have been able to use Minecraft and do web quests to move through and gain some of the skill development of these job exploration and counseling. But I will also say, and as you can see my pictures, face-to-face is pretty cool too. Because when we were able to be face-to-face, students would come and spend 5 nights on campus, really exploring a lot of different types of jobs. My favorite, and as you can see, there's 2 pictures of my favorite, but that is the volcanologist. I did decide I missed my calling. I should have been a person to study volcanoes because it sounds like pretty much the coolest job ever. But these students get to learn about a lot of instruction. Science, technology, engineering, math is a huge focus of what the different things are that students can learn. But another part of this program, because this program is really focused on students with communication needs, is we have the students do a lot of work with avatars to learn on how to communicate. And this would be communication with a professor and or communication with an employer. So really working on those communication skills and doing it with the use of avatars really helps some of those individuals that have a hard time communicating face-to-face with an actual person. So that's one of our programs. Next slide.
I'm thinking I'm gonna just show up and like crash your party because that looks like so much fun.
I will tell you, when I get to go to my camps in the summer, it is my favorite part of my job. I absolutely love it. One of the other programs that we have, and I love, this is a program I do with Angela from iPool, is our work of art program. Our work of art program, we've had in many different regions throughout the state. Right now, we've got one going in Coeur d'Alene, and we've got one starting a couple weeks here in Boise. But what our work of art program is students will work with a teaching artist and some employer. So that employer can be anyone from, as you can see here, we have Microsoft as one of our employers. We've had that's HP. Oh, Angela, I'm so sorry. I said Microsoft. It's HP. What did I do? HP. We've worked with the Idaho Arts Council, to food. Who's the big food one that we did, Angela?
The Idaho Hunger Relief Task Force.
Idaho Hunger Relief Task Force. So we've had many different employers that we've worked with, but basically what the students will do under the teaching artist is they will get to work with the employer to develop some type of piece of art. And we have done this virtually as well, which we had initially decided to do it virtually because of COVID, but now we've realized, no, we need to have a virtual option every year because that allows our students in rural populations that don't have one of these programs close to them to be able to participate in this program. The virtual one that we did last year was with St. Luke's, and each of the students developed a piece of art that is now a mural in St. Luke's as you walk in the door of what they do. What's also really great about this is students get paid. So it is a paid work experience or a paid internship for them to be able to go through. But not only do they get to do the stuff for the love of art, but they learn problem solving, working as a team, you know, taking someone's feedback and making a product based on something and the needs of someone else. So it's a really positive program. We also, as I said, we do paid work experience. We have paid work experience around the state. That program, basically, we have students start with 1 week of work readiness training, followed by a paid work experience within the different communities that we serve. Some of the communities that we've served or where we have these is Coeur d'Alene, Lewiston, Lapway, Fruitland, Nampa Caldwell, Boise, Twin Falls, Burley, Preston, Pocatello, Blackfoot, Idaho Falls, and Rexburg. And again, some of those surrounding areas. You'll notice that Emmett and Mountain Home are on here as well. The reason that they're circled is unfortunately we didn't get enough students signed up in those two communities to be able to hold the program this summer. So we weren't able to do those programs. But as I said, this program that we have we've had every year for the last 6 years, and it's never once filled up. We always have spots open for students to get jobs. We also work with the educational services for the deaf and blind, and we provide we provide the same service for students who are deaf or hard of hearing. That service includes all interpreting needs of students as well as captioning needs when those are needed for the student, whether that be on the job or during their work readiness training. We have our Boise State Prep Academy, and this is for students who are really looking into going into college. The students will, again, fingers crossed, be able to stay on campus, stay in the dorms and learn about living in the dorms. They learn about financial literacy, college note taking, how to be a good student, but they also do a lot of job exploration of learning about different jobs that are available and what does the secondary, post-secondary options look like to help them get to that job. Sometimes we'll have students go through this program and realize, you know, I don't think college is really where I want to be. And so then that's really great because then we can direct the focus in Invoke Rehab on saying, okay, then let's find something else that you might want to do if college doesn't seem the right step for you. Where we've had other students go through this program and they're like, oh, this is why my high school teachers are telling me to work so hard so I can prepare myself to be a good college student. And in VR, we think both of those are huge successes that students have walked away from this program, whether it's going into the direction in college or deciding, hey, maybe I want to look into another types of jobs to give. We also have one at the University of Idaho, and same thing. This one is very similar to the one that we have at Boise State, other than that they have a component of working on social skill development. So how to have conversations with their professors if they need things, ways that they can make friends and develop friendships when they're on the college campus. They even do some independent living skills, like how to do your laundry, different things like that. So they build those components in because, as we know, every student has different needs. And so making sure that we find different ways that we can meet the different needs of the students that we work with.
That sounds like a teenager training camp. How do we do laundry? How do we talk to people? How do we advocate for ourselves? Yes, most
yes,
high school students I know.
But at the same time, also trying to say, and where do you want to go? What types of jobs do you want to do? And what does that look like? What's nice, the Vandal Academy is a little bit smaller than Boise State. So it's able to be a little bit more tailored to a student that comes in and says, I want to do something in fashion design, because then we get a faculty person that does fashion design to meet and discuss with the student and try to show them what this, how to do this. Question, how does a student find out and sign up about this? Invoke Rehab. You must contact your Invoke Rehab counselor. If you do not have a Invoke Rehab counselor, you can contact me at the end of this and I will shoot you in the direction of who that person would be or how you can get a hold of that person. And they should be able to discuss all of these program options with you and what we're doing. And again, as I said, these are all free for students. There's no cost associated with any of these programs. They're all something that Invoke Rehab pays for the complete cost of the program. And we really want them to fill up.
Yeah, you're about to get all of the teenagers I know in your lap. Okay, so
Yay!
so I wanted to just introduce this concept because this is the Parent Network. We get a lot of questions about this, and we invited Alan to be part of this panel so that they can have these, we can have this information to our families. It's important to me as a parent that that I know what part is mine and what part is not mine, because when I know how much my kid needs help and I'm not allowed to help them, my anxiety goes nuts. So let's just say this part is for me. This part is for me. It's probably for him too, but it's also for me. And so I wanted to make sure Alan was here to kind of walk through that legal side of things for us so that we can kind of get a grasp on, where the transition is legally for us. So Alan?
Thanks, Laura. So when your child turns 18 in Idaho, they become a legal adult. And once they become a legal adult, the law looks at them as they have the ability to make all of their own decisions, all these life decisions that you and I make every single day. And so we have to look at what authority does a parent or someone else have to make decisions for another person after someone turns 18. And so before we go there, we first want to point out, until they turn 18, you are still the parent or the guardian. You can participate in meetings, sign documents, apply for benefits, do whatever you need to do because they're under the age of 18. After the age of 18, in order for you to continue to help out with your child, there's a couple different options. And the options right now in Idaho is first that the child can sign a consent. And they can do this with doctors, counselors, banks, whatever. They can sign a consent authorizing other people to be able to have access to their records, to be able to be present at various meetings with the doctors or counselors, and to be able to be involved in the decisions that are made in those. This next one is powers of attorney. We typically do these financial powers of attorney and also medical powers of attorney. There are declarations for mental health treatment that are in the law. I don't see those used very often, but they are there. And these powers of attorney, they authorize, once again, it's the child signing it, and the consents and the powers of attorney, they have to be signed after they're 18. But once they're signed, the child can designate someone else to make financial decisions for them or to make medical decisions for them. And they can designate that those decisions can be made immediately, or they can say, when I'm not able to make them, then my agent would be able to step in and make them. And that is set out in the power of attorney as to when the person has authority to make decisions for another person. The last one is guardian and conservatorship. And this is where you as a parent or as a guardian apply to the court, and the court issues an order authorizing someone else to make decisions on behalf of another person, in this case, your child. And so if we go to the next slide, we'll kind of look at some of the pros and cons for each one of these options that we have. First, consents. It's very easy. Just with each provider, you go into the child after they're 18, they sign the consent that the various provider has for them. The biggest con is it's limited just to that provider, and it can be easily revoked. If there's a crisis, which with mental health issues happens often, probably more often than we'd like, but it happens. And so if they are having an off day and they don't want mom to be present, or dad to be present at their appointment, then they can revoke their consent. And then the provider's put in a difficult situation where he's got to, if the only authority the parent has to be there is the consent of the individual, and the individual saying, I don't consent, then they're not going to be able to be there.
I think it's important that we talk about secondary education on the post-secondary, I guess. Community colleges, once they step in the door, even if they're not 18 yet, most of those schools will not talk to parents. However, there are happy little forms that fall under consents that your kids can sign that says, yeah, mom's allowed to call, and so that's something that I had to navigate, was to have my son sign those forms, mainly so that I could help him follow the process and make sure he'd done all the things he needed to do and he didn't get lost, because they couldn't even acknowledge he was a student there if they didn't have those consents signed. So for parents who have kids who start community college under the age of 18, this actually still applies to you in most locations, but definitely after 18. So I just found that one out the hard way. There was this whole extra form I had to fill out so I could keep doing the things I'd always been doing.
Right. There's always an exception to the rule. And that's
education.
Secondary education, you're right. They can sign those before they're 18. With the powers of attorney, once again, they're pretty simple to create. The Idaho has a statutory financial power of attorney, as well as a statutory medical power of attorney. They can be found online and you can just fill them out, and they don't need to be notarized, except a financial one does if you're dealing with real estate, which isn't usually too often happening with these kids. So once again, they're easy to create, and they assign their agent to be who they want, that they trust. The cons of these are they can be easily revoked, just like the consent. If they want to revoke them, they can, and that includes a verbal consent. And once again, if you have a child that's got mental health issues and is cycling, they can revoke those powers of attorney. Declarations for mental health treatment, we try and set out in those how to handle a crisis. But once again, those have limitations. And so the clear option, in order to ensure that you have authority to be able to act, even if your child's cycling, is a guardian conservatorship. And that is where you apply to the court, and the court authorizes someone else to make decisions on your behalf. The cons of that is it does reduce the individual's control over their life. And it can take some time. It's about a 3 to 4 month process. You have to get a criminal background check. You've got to do some online trainings. If we have a development disability in addition to a mental health issue, then they have to meet with an evaluation committee. If we're strictly mental health and there's no development disability, then we have to have reports from a doctor, and also meet with a court visitor, and they do reports to the court. And then lastly, you have to have an attorney appointed for the child. And that person meets with the proposed guardians as well as the child and writes a report to the court. And so it's a process, and there has to be cause. You have to show why this person can't make their own decisions. And just as a side note, there is a movement nationally in the state to make another option called supported decision making. There's no set forms yet right now. However, I'm on a committee that we are looking at some new laws in this area with regards to guardian conservatorship that may be proposed as we're working towards January of 2023. And so this is the current state of the law. But if you're going to get a guardianship, be sure you talk to your attorney and make sure that they're up to speed and know about where the current state of the law is and what's coming. So thank you, Laura.
Well, I think it's important that we recognize that not any one of these answers is a one size fits all. Every kid is individual. Every family situation is individual. What they can do and what they can't do and what they need support with is different. As Alan pointed out, if you have a kid who cycles and gets really angry at mom and then loves mom, angry at mom, loves mom, if we have a power of attorney that keeps getting verbally revoked, no, I really wanted it. No, I didn't. Yes, I did. It can be hard for a parent to reliably be allowed to help in those situations, but that doesn't mean that guardian conservatorship is necessarily right for that kid. So it's an individual decision. I think that the Parent Network really wanted to make sure that parents understood the differences here and what was involved, not to try and help make a family, you know, make a decision for the family, but so that they knew the right questions to ask, so that they have the right information at the right time to have the, you know, the right support for that kiddo. So I just want to make that clear. But this leads into the very next question that we left Kristen for the end. But honestly, we did this because we didn't want everyone's ears to get like overwhelmed, because this is the part that parents have nightmares about. I think that we probably, you know, lay in bed in cold sweats over how this is going to work when they turn 18. And I found out when I was going through this process, actually, that Kristen was the one who, whether she meant to or not, held my hand through it. I had to ask questions for another project I was working on. And I took copious notes, and through my entire transition process with my child, I was referring back to her notes over and over again. Okay, I did that. Nope, can't do that. Oh, can do that. So I was really grateful she was willing to join us, because this part is confusing for families. So Kristen, can you help us understand the magic, you know, the magic genie that is benefits when you become an adult? Oh, you're on mute. But we all do that.
There we go. Now I'm off mute. Yes, I do that all the time. I usually have double mute, but there's no phone today. So definitely. And most of what I'm going to talk about is focused on Medicaid, and then hoping having a couple extra minutes, I can talk about some other benefit programs we have here at the department. But the first thing I think everyone should know is you should receive a notice from us when your child's benefits are going to end. So before they turn 18, a notice should be coming out to you, and it's usually 30 to 60 days before those benefits are going to end, and it will tell you that their benefits are going to end. So I would recommend applying for benefits prior to your child turning 18. It might just make it easier for you, and we can accept applications up to 45 days before then. Where we like to do it is at 30 days, but we can extend out a couple weeks from there. So being able to do that. If you do apply before your child turns 18, like Alan was saying, you can apply for benefits for your child alone on behalf of your child. And when you do that, you can designate yourself as an authorized representative, which means you can take any case action on that application. And once that authorized rep designation is made, and as part of the application, you have to either call us or send something to us in writing to end that. So it might just simplify that process a little bit. In addition, if your child is going to be working with a caseworker or has someone who's helping with the transition period, they may also be able to be listed as an authorized rep if you choose to do that. You can have multiple authorized reps on a case. And Laura, I'm adding this in. I don't know if we talked about this when we talked, but as an authorized rep, it doesn't mean you're going to get the notices and all the mailings that we send out. So if you're designated as the authorized rep and you want to be the primary person to receive notices that we mail out, put that as the mailing address. Your child may have a different physical address, but you can have a separate mailing address. If you want your child to get both because you want your child to also take an active part, you can also list yourself as what's called an additional correspondence. So you would get all the same mailings and notices that your child is getting on the case. Once your child turns 18, they are going to have to be the one that designates you as an authorized rep or as an additional correspondence on that case.
So you have used the term on the case. So I'm assuming this is not like a PI who's investigating a case. So this is a group
on the
of
application. So on the Medicaid case. So let me clarify that on the Medicaid case. So when you are doing your application, we refer to it as a case. You'll have a case number. Your child, similar to as a child, has a unique identifier that allows them to get services through Medicaid. But so on the Medicaid case, it will list your child as the applicant and then any authorized rep or additional correspondence. So, and then just some important things to know. So when you're applying, when your child's getting ready to turn 18, you need to have an adult development, a DD determination, or a mental health diagnosis. So even if you have one for them as a child, you're going to need to have one as an adult in order to continue those services with Medicaid as an adult. And we recommend starting to work on that process about 6 months ahead of your child turning 18, because it does take some time. We do have the ability, and I will let you know, to do Medicaid benefits retroactively. So if for some reason you start the process late or things are getting held up and you've applied for adult Medicaid for your child and you don't have that determination, also tell the worker you want retro benefits. And that allows us to go back 3 months prior to the approval date for Medicaid. So once that application gets approved, you can go back 3 months to get those services. But tell us ahead of time, because we have cases where we're not told ahead of time. And if the determination, the medical diagnosis that you're getting, or the DD determination you're getting doesn't cover that period, we cannot go back and do those benefits. But if we know that at the time of application, and then we get the medical documents that support those services, then we can go back and do that on there. And then, I mentioned this before, we send a lot of mail to folks, and the more benefits you're on, the more mail you're going to get from us. But make sure to read the notices that you get, because they should be telling you like when services are going to end, or if additional verifications are going to be needed. I know we're talking about transition from child to adult, but for folks that are on the call that might have kids that are under 18, also, if you have kids that are transitioning from Medicaid to CHIP benefits, if you transition to CHIP, your services, DD services, are going to end. And you really need to call us, because we do have other programs like Katie Beckett and YES and AABD Medicaid, where your child might qualify and be able to continue those services. So it's just really important to read those notices.
Kristen, I would say that to add to that, read the notices, read all of the notice. And I know that sounds funny, but I have found that the intro paragraph is very similar on multiple different types of notices. And so I've thought, oh, this is just a duplicate notice to the last thing. And then I happen to read it, and halfway down, I'm like, oh, that there's more or different information here than I thought. And remember when I told Angela I had, 8 binders full of information? I will say that the state of Idaho's communication process is abundant, because half those binders are probably notices from the state. But they're really important, and to read it all the way through, because when I think it starts out as one thing and I get down farther, I'm like, oh, this is different information, and I have an action step required. So I appreciate you said to read it, but I would say read all of it.
Yeah, that's a good point, because they start out the same and then they get into more detail and for different information. Through the Department of Health and Welfare, we also issue SNAP benefits. So when your child is turning 18, if they're going to be living independently, you can also apply for SNAP benefits for that child. For SNAP applications, we're only able to take those applications 30 days ahead of time, but the process is the same if you're doing it in person at an office or over the phone. And the worker can take all that information and then determine if your child is going to be eligible for SNAP. If your child is still going to live in your home, your family may still be eligible for SNAP, but the parent's income does count until the child is the age of 22. And at that point, if the child is purchasing and preparing their food separately, they can be on a separate case.
And what does SNAP stand for?
So SNAP is, that's what's known as the food stamp program here in Idaho. So that's food assistance program. Benefits come on an EBT card. It's not a cash benefit. You can use it at an approved retailer, and most of the large stores here and many of the small retailers here in Idaho do accept SNAP or food stamp benefits.
Is it supplemental nutrition assistance program?
Right. And that program, it's at 130% or below of poverty. So for a single person, oh my gosh, and it just changed I want to say the income limit is around $13.90 a month, and that's gross. But if there's a disability, then the person is subject to the net income, and that can vary because it's based on expenses, like an expense income ratio. So and then there's also a resource limit under SNAP, and that's generally around 5,000 for someone who's disabled. There is no resource limit. It's a little confusing with this program. And then we'll look at some expenses. So shelter expenses are taken into consideration. For someone who's disabled, we'll look at medical expenses that are paid out of pocket, and then a benefit amount is determined. They just went up, and I feel really bad because I don't have them in front of me. They just went up, but I want to say for a single person, it's $270 something, and that would be the max amount allowed, but it will change based on the income and expense and ratio.
So this is something that you really do need to look into each individual case so that you can make sure you're telling the self-reliance staff member all of these details to figure out what you can qualify for and what, the specifics of your situation.
And they should be able to help you. And then another, we do the, and I don't know if you're familiar with LIHEAP, but LIHEAP is a heating assistance benefit for people. And if someone qualifies for SNAP, it's what's called presumptive eligibility. They would automatically be approved for a LIHEAP benefit. We don't actually do that benefit here. It's done through the community action agencies, so local community action agencies. But if you need contact information on how to access those, I can certainly send a link to a site that would list all the different community action agencies. And how that program basically works is if the family or person has a heating expense that's not included in their rent, there's a calculation, and their provider will get an amount on behalf of that person that will be deducted from their heating costs throughout the year. And it's one benefit every 12 months. So, and it's a first come, first serve. The program year starts every year over in October. And applications, I think it depends with some of these agencies. It's been a long time since I've worked directly with them, but sometimes they start taking them in October. Sometimes they start taking them in November, but I would call. Also under this program, there's an emergency energy assistance program. So if you have a child who's living on their own, who hasn't been paying their bills, and they get a disconnection notice, you can qualify for emergency benefits that will help offset those costs, or will help get that disconnection, get that turned back on. Once again, you can get one benefit every 12 months under this, and it's a first come, first serve, and it's also done through the Community Action Agency partnership. And then we also implement a program that's a commodity food program. It's called TFAP. And there are income limits, and they're usually done through food pantries. And it's just self-declaration saying your income is below, I want to say for this program, it's 133%. And at those locations, you can get additional food.
And when she's referring to percentages, I'm assuming you are referring to federal poverty line.
Yes, I am.
So we have about a minute and a half left, and I just wanted to tell you how appreciative I am of you, Kristen, because that is probably more information in one place than most families ever get. We call places to talk to people like Angela, and it's so confusing, and the state and the government in general likes acronyms. It's our favorite thing to do. I'm firmly convinced there's someone who sits in a dark closet somewhere who does nothing but come up with acronyms for us to use across the state. So especially in the State Department of Ed, you're good at it too, aren't you? So thank you, Kristen. I know that there's others that if kids apply for or eligible for Social Security, disability, there's some programs that come through there. I think you mentioned AABD.
Yes.
What is that one? That's the one I
think.
So
ABD it's a Medicaid program. It's benefits for the age aged, aid to the aged, blind, and disabled. And so like it does nursing home benefits. It does if individuals need in-home care benefits for that. It's a little bit different from regular Medicaid because there is a resource limit and there definitely has to be a medical diagnosis that would allow an individual, an adult, to qualify for that. And as part of the application process, just really quickly, when someone is applying for benefits, there's about 40 Medicaid codes. So there's all these different programs. So when you're applying and we're getting that information will help determine what benefit an individual get. And that's why it's really important for us to know if there's like a DD determination or some sort of mental health diagnosis, because the worker then can key that and request that verification if we don't already have it for the individual. And that will help us determine if someone might qualify for AABD, like a child that's transitioning might qualify for AABD, might qualify for that benefit instead of Medicaid directly. And the income limits are a little different and the resource limits are a little bit different for each of those programs. But in some instances, it will give you more services.
So thank you. Thank you for that. Such a complicated thing, but it is so incredibly vital. So I think if we had to sum up everything we talked about, it would be ask questions, make sure that your school's involved while the kids are still in school. Invoke Rehab goes into adulthood. I pulls around like all the time for all the things. Then there is legal options that we do need to be paying attention to. And those benefits are things that we need to look into. We need to get educated and we need to share the information, whether that's online, on the phone, or in person. We will have links to all of these options. And as Angela's new resource comes out for IPOL, we'll make sure we have a link to the new one. I know there's been some work done around the state on mental health specific transitions, and we will link to those as those resources become available. Thank you to all of you guys. I learned so much. I mean, Allison, I'm going to tell you, my kids are going to be ending up in your office, like seriously, next week. And, you know, Randy, I actually learned things today that I didn't know. And I really thought that I had beat this horse to death. So I really, I'm learning it. Thank you guys for everything. Kristen, as always, it's a pleasure. Alan, you're always great to explain these things in a way that someone can actually understand them. And Angela, you are always there for all the things. So thank you guys. I always appreciate these conversations. Thank you for being part of this panel. I'm looking forward to the video going up. And yes, all of you send me all the resource links you discussed today and we'll get them posted. And Kristen, as I said, thank you for trying to demystify something that just makes our heads spin. So thank you guys, all of you. I appreciate it and have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. And I'll talk to you guys all later. We'll see you tomorrow for the next conference session. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.